Please welcome Elie Wiesel.
Rabbi Greenberg, rabbis, Gary, and friends. Tonight, I wish that some of you who read my work would speak not about the sad tales I told, but the joyous tales I retold. After all, we are in a Hasidic ambiance, and I have written so much about Hasidism, much more than about the war, much more than about the suffering of our people. But that is something that you must understand why I wrote it. Rabbi Hankin came to me and said that he remembers an article I wrote in the Jewish Daily Forward. I used to work for that paper. I loved Yiddish, still do. And I explained why I go to Lubavitch. And there I said that I, at one point in my life, thought that the Jewish people will never be capable of rejoicing. There'll be no more laughter on our face and no more happiness to invoke. And so in Lubavitch I find all that. And tonight I found it. I found it when I listened to you, Rabbi. I love that. Hasidism with humor, great. It's not new. When you study the history of Hasidism and literature of Hasidism, you know, so many Hasidic masters had a tremendous sense of humor, and that helped them overcome melancholy. In truth, I tried to prove it, in at least in two of my works on Hasidism, that the very great masters, the builders of the Hasidic movement, all of them suffered from melancholy. All. Even the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the movement, who after all, without cars or planes, just with a horse and wagon, visited 286 cities and villages in his life. And he was revealed in 1736 and he died in 1760. Why? To bring the joy of the word and the promise of friendship. Hasidism means friendship. The book Chaverim, we call it. It's as important as Emunat Tzadikim, as faith in the Master. Even the Baal Shem Tov, the last year of his life, suffered from melancholy. The seer of Lublin, Tzaddik of Pshischa, the Kotzker Rebbe, my God, the Kotzker Rebbe who spent 20 years in solitude, they all at one point suffered from melancholy. Why? And I try to understand it, and I think I do. Who came to a Rebbe at that time? Not happy people. Those who came, either their financial situation was catastrophic, or somebody was sick, the husband in jail. And you know, you hear that day after day, hour after hour, year after year. At one point, it was too much. And therefore, we know it. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, I can prove it. But they all had the strength afterwards to emerge from that melancholy. And how did they do that? By helping those who came. And that is the marvelous lesson of Hasidism. The only way for us to invoke happiness in a world which has often tried to negate it is to bring happiness to others. The only way for us to redeem ourselves is to give the hope the vision, the premonition of redemption to anyone who approaches us. As a teacher, it's my duty to speak like that to my students, as a writer to my readers, as a Hasid to my fellow Hasidim. You know, I think some of you, I just saw one of you at least has read my first book. The best definition of Hasidism I got indirectly from a situation in which my late teacher and friend, one of the greatest Talmudic scholars, I believe, since the Gaon of Vilna, was Shaul Lieberman, Zechrono Livracha. He was a misnagid, but he was my teacher. And one day, he invited Gershom Scholem, who was literally the founder of mysticism, as a scholarly discipline, to give a lecture. And he introduced him. He said, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Scholem teaches at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He's teaching mysticism. What is mysticism? Nonsense. At which point, of course, everyone in the hall was frozen. And then he said, nonsense is nonsense, but the history of nonsense is scholarship. Well, Hasidism is no nonsense. Hasidism has a meaning. It's not a doctrine, it's not a theory. It's a way of life, a way of remembering, a way of accepting history on its highest level of commitment and beauty. What the Baal Shem Tov did, he brought beauty in our life. And he opened our eyes to beauty. When he, as a tutor, would take children to Cheder, he would stop occasionally just to show them, look at the trees, look at the clouds. There is beauty in God's creation. And in Eastern Europe, when Jews lived closed in their homes, always in fear of a pogrom, always worried to go into the street because who knows when the hooligan will attack, to stop and say, look, there is beauty, is something that to this day Hasidism is trying to share with all of us. And that is, I believe, what I found in Lubavitch. It's not only a kind of truth, what we call in philosophy truth. I mean, truth, Hashem Elokeinu Emet, God is truth. Not only true, God is truth. It's more than that. In Hasidism, the way we found in Lubavitch, and I confess to you, I must, out of sincerity, that I have never been a Hasid of Lubavitch, nor am I now. But I say to you, I used to say to the Rebbe, each time we met, we had a ritual. Each time we met, and we met a lot of times, also begin, Rebbe, I am not yours. I am not Lubavitch. I am Vishnitz. I belong to Vishnitz. And then we began talking. In parentheses, I'll tell you a story which is in the book, but I don't think I've ever told it in Cleveland. Once I came on Simchat Torah. I spent Simchat Torah in Brooklyn. And of all things, I went, Shmini Atzeret, I went for Satmar. Why? Satmar, the Rebbe, Zal also, was a Gon Batei. I opposed him politically on everything, because anti-Zionism, anti-Israel. He was still a Gaon B'Torah. So I want to see Shmini Atzeret, the first Hakafot at Satmar. Next day, Simchas Torah, I went to Lubavitch. It was raining outside. And I came, the raincoat, with a beret. I don't like hats, I have a beret. And stood at the door. The Rebbe sat, you know, at his place, the table, hundreds, thousands of Lubavitcher Hasidim inside, singing and singing and singing. All of a sudden, he noticed me. I made myself very small. I looked like James Bond, you know. There. He called me, the Eliezer. Again, I was even smaller. So he gave an order, and the Hasidim picked me up, literally, and they carried me on their shoulders, like that. I didn't touch ground. and placed me on the table, on the very table, facing him. And he said, Rebbe Eliezer, this is how you do in Vizhnitz? You don't even come to say L'chaim? I said, Rabbi, I'm not in Vizhnitz, I'm a Lubavitch. He said, then why don't you do what we do in Lubavitch? I said, Rabbi, what does one do in Lubavitch? He said, I'll tell you what. And they gave me a glass of vodka, a big glass of vodka. I said, Rabbi, in Vizhnitz we don't drink alone. He said, nor do we drink in Lubavitch alone. So we made the bracha and said, L'chaim. He drank, emptied it. So did I, except I don't drink. I drank the whole glass. And I suffer from migraine headaches. My friend whom I met today, Michael, you should know, I suffer from terrible migraine headaches. And I had already pills in me. I took the glass. Okay. Then he said, in Vizhnitz, that's all? I said, we are in Lubavitch. He said, Lubavitch is only the beginning. I said, in Vizhnitz too. So we drank another glass of My head was turning. And then he said, how about more? I said, of course, Rabbi, in Vizhnitz. And I drank. He said, what should I give you a bracha? What bracha would you like from me? I said, in Vizhnitz, the Rabbi knows. And he gave me a bracha. He said, let it be a new beginning. And he's so clever. Simchat Torah is my birthday. So it could be a new beginning for your birthday. It also meant the relevance to our conversations. We had many, many conversations, and very painful conversations. I mean, conversations about painful subjects. And what he meant, I think, is it's time to begin again. And I drank the third glass. It was as big as these glasses. Not the small ones that usually gave for. And I passed out. I passed out. And I found myself already outside on the grass, on wet grass. And then a few steps away, I saw a younger Lubavitcher Rebbe, whom I knew, Wiesel. And he already had a few, 100 or so Hasidim around him, and he explained the mystical meaning of our encounter. And I wish I could hear him to know why. The Rebbe was very special to all of you, I know, and to Gary, and of course to you, Rabbi Ashlow, to me too. Made him special because first I liked, he had beauty on his face. He was a beautiful man. When he looked at you, his eyes penetrated you, but without hurting, without wounding you. They literally entered your own eyes, and deeper than that. So much so that at one point, it was enough for him and me to be silent for a few minutes. We spoke without words. And then either I or he, usually he, I would respectfully wait, would shake himself and said, let's continue. And we continued. Always long conversations. Occasionally, we disagreed. We disagreed, for instance, about Soviet Jewry. Since 1965, I was involved in Soviet Jewry with the Remachu B'Shsa, as we say, with every fiber of my being. I came back from there and I felt every single day I had to do something with Soviet Jewry. And at that time, the American Jewish community did not help at all, wasn't interested at all. They didn't want to hear about it. Avraham Joshua Heschel, also a friend of mine, and I would go around trying to wake up people, nothing doing. The Rebbe did not believe in demonstrations. He believed in secret diplomacy. And I believed in that too. But I felt, having seen what I had seen, and I write about it in Jews of Silence, I felt I cannot be silent. But I wanted more and more people to writing petitions and things. So we had a disagreement on that. And he wasn't angry, nor was I. Of course, how can I be angry at the Rebbe? Also about the catastrophe. I couldn't not question not only myself, which I did every day, but how could I not question the master of the universe for what was happening in his universe? And I wrote about it actually. I wrote a novel called The Gates of the Forest. The 4th chapter is about him. The discussions, the conversations I had with the Rebbe. And nobody won. Lieberman, my Misnagget teacher, once asked me, who is the most tragic figure in the Bible? I said, Isaac, Yitzchak. After all, to wake up one morning, lying on the altar, and see his father with a knife in his hand, is most tragic. He said, no. I said, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, poor man. After he always had to suffer. Either God was displeased with him, or his people bothered him. And the people bothered him so much that I was wondering at one point whether God's decision not to allow him to enter the Holy Land was not a punishment, but a reward. You had enough problems with your people. Come. And you know, I never invented these matters. I always, even when I say I question God, I never invent. I repeat what I read in the Midrash. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu buried in a place that nobody knows? So that later on, when the Jewish people will be in trouble and in pain, they should not be able to come and bother him in his sleep. It's time for him to rest. No, I said, okay, I don't know. He said, the most tragic character in Scripture is the Ribbono Shel Olam, is God himself. Look, he's giving us a beautiful world. And he must look down and say, what are you doing to my creation? It's true. What are we doing to his creation? What are we doing today? What is the world doing to us? Today we go through very difficult times. I'm sure that in Cleveland, as in New York, or as in Paris, wherever Jews are, a kind of anxiety is settling in. We cannot not worry. Anti-Semitism is on the rise to a degree that one doesn't even dare to explore because of the conclusions one might draw. What's happening to Europe, my God? Haven't they learned anything? And what's happening to all over the world that condemns Israel without any trace of desire to understand Israel's situation. When I'm in Israel, I go there at least 3 times a year, but more often. Or whenever I'm in New York or in Boston and I read about Israel, I wonder whether it's not simply a miracle that the Jewish people in Israel does not suffer from a collective nervous breakdown. When a mother cannot send a child to school without worrying whether a bus will not explode. The suicide killers, as I call them, have become the Muslim world's absolute weapon. That's how they treat it. Because there is no way of disarming them. And we know that. I spoke to the generals in Israel. I spoke in Washington. Wherever I go, in truth, you cannot. If people have developed a cult of death, and that becomes both a means and an end, there is very little you can do, especially with the new biological weapons that have already been invented, but they don't have them yet. And so we wonder what's happening in this world. anyone had told me in 1945, I have a friend here who was from my town, from Siget. We were together the last transport. And we went together to Auschwitz, and we came to Paris together. And if anyone had told us that we will have to fight the fight against anti-Semitism again in our lifetime, we wouldn't have believed that. This is one fight I thought I will not have to fight. And here we are, we have to fight. And when I do that, when I think in my work, occasionally I close my eyes, really, and I told you, Rabbi, I miss the Rebbe, just to come and talk to him. There must be meaning in all that. Michael Mashmalan, when you study Talmud, Michael Mash, what does it mean? What does it mean that the world is becoming once more so indifferent to Jewish pain, to Jewish fears, to Jewish anguish? And yet, it's my favorite expression, and yet I believe that whatever the meaning is, we must not allow it to implant an irrepressible doubt in us about our own mission as Jews, about our own existence, which is always temporary, waiting, about our hope that one day, I believe in that. I believe that one day we shall leave the Messiah. I say the Ani Mamin every day with Kavanah. I say it. I believe in that. Otherwise, how could we go on living? So, and yet I believe that they won't win. They cannot win. They cannot win because as long as we know what we are doing in this world, we could have disappeared, my God, so often. So often. They have tried, the other side has tried, literally using any method you can imagine. They tried coercion, they tried persecution, they tried seduction. It was easy. Those who stayed in Spain, for instance, or in Portugal and converted, it was easy. 4 generations later, it's finished. In Poland, at a certain period, after the Frankists debacle and shame, when a Jew converted, he got a fortune, he got a nobility, he got a title, just for converting. So it was possible to get rid of us. And we could have logically vanished from the surface of history. And yet we didn't. We are, as I like to say, the only people of antiquity who survived antiquity. So why? Why are we doing that? Why do we cling to history? Well, history says to us day after day, look, Jewish people, we don't want you. We don't want your honey, we don't want your poison, we don't want your genius, we don't want anything. Go. I can give you examples of other people who did that, who left. Goodbye history, finish. After the destruction of the temple, we are told that the Peroshim, the Pharisees, decided to leave, the men left their wives, not to have children anymore. As if to say to the Rebbeinu Shalom, you don't want us? Okay, no more children. We cannot take it anymore. But they were overruled. Rabbi Ishmael told it, they were overruled. And they married, and they had children, and we have children. As long as we know why, I don't think that they can ever push us too far. And here we go back to the Rebbe. I know often people ask me, why didn't the Rebbe stop the nonsense when some of his close disciples, who thought they were close, saw in him the Messiah? And I feel, did he take himself? Of course, he never thought he was the Mashiach. But my feeling is he realized how deep the sadness has been and still is, or the sequels of that sadness. And he wanted them so much to wait for the Messiah, that he let them think what they did, the way they did. It's only because he wanted them to go on waiting and praying and hoping. And so I went to see usually the Farbrengen and see him conducting these thousands of singers. And I thought of King David, that as long as King David was saying that the Tehillim, was composing his psalms, was singing his songs to God and for God, death had no power over him. And I felt often that the Rebbe, when he was singing, that had no power over him. But then he stopped. But we continued the song. And you, my good friends here, I cannot tell you how touched I am with you, that you are building a new synagogue. I love beginnings. I love beginnings. And really, they asked me, why did you come today? Because I didn't tell them, because that was the beginning of a center, beginning of schools, beginning of a synagogue. I love beginnings. And may you continue to begin more and more and still more. The joy of the beginning is one that could be a blessing, a great blessing, a blessing that means a fraternity, an appeal to friendship among those who participate in it, and above all, to be a member of a choir. What you are doing with your words, with your deeds, with your plans, is just music. The way you spoke about the kitchen, the way you spoke about the building, and the way you spoke about your first minyan, I love that. Of course, that's a song. And that song carries us, as it has carried us from century to century, from land to land, and from one Hasidic movement to another, from one Rebbe to another. After all, we are still at the beginning.